Welcome, everyone. My name is Peter Young. I'm a member of the Committee 100, and I happen to be the head of the Committee 100 Asian American Career Ceilings Initiative, which has been a wonderful program that we started about 3 years ago. And now this is the 31st event. We've had in-person, we've had virtual events since February of 2020, and it's been wonderful. We never intended to do these many, but I think we discovered that this is a really important issue for Asian Americans. It's a real big problem. And we've been very fortunate to have academics who are doing studies to show how big the problem is and how to solve it. We've had people from different industries like this one. And we've even had one where we just took 4 millennials and said, what do you think of this? And that was great because they have a different perspective. And we had one on family, how families raise kids. So we had a bunch of parents who were Indian American, Chinese American, so forth, just talk about the influence of of families and how they raise kids and so forth. So we've done a whole bunch. I'm going to introduce our speakers. We have an hour, but I do want to just mention that on January 16th, we're going to have one with a panel on a topic that no one really cares about, which is why Asian Americans make less money. So I'm sure it won't have much interest on the part of the people who are attending here, but the details will go out. And then we have one on February 8th, which is on journalism in the news, which is also a profession that's got some serious problems with regard to obstacles for Asian Americans. So first of all, I'm just very excited to have this panel, and they are really we have a diverse panel because they're in different parts of the fashion industry, but they're all quite accomplished and will be able to comment about how they see this problem, how big a problem is it, but also what advice they would give to those of you who are listening in, if you are involved with the fashion industry. But what we're going to do is we're going to start out, we're going to leave us time at the end for Q&A. And for that time, we just want all of you just to either type your question in the chat box or raise your hand. But we'll leave time at the end. But we're going to get started first I'm going to ask each of our panelists to take 2 or 3 minutes and say, what do you do? And how did you get here? And where you are. But the other is, why is this question? Why is this topic of importance to you? So I guess we will start out arbitrarily. We're going to start out alphabetical by last name. So Eva, you're first.
Oh my gosh, the anxiety and the unfairness of having the last name Chen. Well, thank you very much, Peter, for that warm introduction. And thank you to my amazing friend, Laura Kim, for inviting me to be on this panel. Peter, you said that some of these people are quite accomplished. I would disagree. I would say they're resoundingly, exceptionally accomplished. I feel so lucky to be on a Zoom with the two of them and you. And so thank you for having us. So my name is Eva Chen. I'm Vice President of Fashion Partnerships here at Instagram. I'm currently in the office. As you can tell, it's pretty depressing to be here so late at night, but I'm really happy to be here. Previously, in a past life, I was a magazine editor for about a decade, working at publications like Teen Vogue, and ending up the editor-in-chief of Lucky magazine, which was a shopping magazine, as well as having contributed to publications from the Wall Street Journal to Vogue, and being a contributor at Vogue China, etc. This topic is really important to me because I feel like I simply didn't have like the roadmaps or career guides growing up of anything other than like, I would say the first generation handbook of being like doctor, banker, lawyer, engineer. And so this topic is really important to me because I believe that the next generation should have more options and understanding of different career paths. And just to have the visibility that I didn't have, that guides a lot of the work I do and the advocacy I have. And so I'm happy to be here to answer any questions that people have.
And were you born and grew up here in the U.S.?
Yes, I am a native New Yorker. My parents are from Taiwan and Shanghai, and Taipei and Shanghai, and they moved here in the 1970s. And so I think that classifies me as first generation. I know people have different definitions of what first generation is. So I speak Chinese. I grew up speaking Chinese, still primarily only speak Chinese to my parents. And they're still here in New York City. So having them and their culture close to me and my three kids has been one of the biggest blessings in my life.
Okay, bye. Laura, you're next.
Hi, my name's Laura Kim. I am co-creative director of Oscar de la Renta, and I have my own brand called Monse. I'm a fashion designer. And before I became a creative director and I was a design assistant, Eva was already a big star at Condé Nast. So I was always looking up to her and see what she's doing. And I was always amazed by how much she accomplished at such an early age. And Roopal, I knew her as a fashion director. And when I started my brand Monse, everyone was like, you have to call Roopal. And I knew who she was, but I was very scared to give her a call. But I found out she's a very nice person. So both of them, to me, like they kind of gave me a roadmap of what to do in this industry. That's why I invited two of them. And yeah, so I think they're gonna give both Rupal and Eva will give us and the audience and me like great advice what to do.
Well, Laura, I don't think you need career advice, but if you're willing to accept it, that's fine. Roopal?
Well, thank you, Peter, and thank you to the committee so much for having us here. When Flora asks me for anything, I will be there in a second. I have so much admiration and respect for her, and Eva as well. I feel like Eva and I have grown up side by side in our roles, and again, so much respect, but not just as industry women and leaders within their own right, but as my friends. You know, I think there's a certain level of camaraderie that we all understand because we all go through the same thing. So, you know, I think that's such a beautiful part of being here today in sisterhood and in support of you know, our culture, our Asian culture, and helping pay it forward, as I like to say. So I'm first generation Indian, as I'm Gujarati. I was born and raised here, and I have been, you know, fashion has been my first love for most of my life. But coming from an Indian family, my parents were born and raised in Kenya, in Kisumu and Nairobi, and they went to school in India and they migrated here. Like Eva said, you know, the idea of going to be a doctor or a lawyer or something very, 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 you know, stable, shall we say, was something that was just part of my plan as a child. And I've been a creative since I was a little girl, and I didn't know how to explain it to my parents. I didn't know how to explain it at school, and it morphed into this passion and love for fashion. And I've been in retail now for a very long time. I won't say how long, but I'm currently the senior vice president fashion director at Saks, and I've been here for 8 years, and it's such a joy to do what I do. But I've held different roles in retail, from, you know, Neiman Marcus to Bergdorf Goodman, Moda. I've had my own consulting company for 5 years. And I think what I love about it is this fusion of beauty. It's like beauty, creativity, and, you know, and business all together. It's left brain, right brain thinking simultaneously at all times. And I get to work with designers, and I get to work with creatives, such as, you know, we're sitting here today. And I think part of why, you know, when Laura asked, like, hey, I'm going to do this, do you want to be a part of it, is I feel, again, I say pay it forward, but I feel so great, lucky and fortunate to have had the mentors and the doors open for me, even when it was tough and difficult, for people to guide me. And I think at this stage of my life and my career, I'd like to help, you know, the next generation sort of explore it and give them confidence to know, like, here's your toolbox, like, this is what you need. And if we did it with zero information, zero internet, zero, you can too.
Yeah. And your parents, I know a lot of Indian American families and you know, their parents, and have they ever forgiven you for not becoming a doctor or engineer?
they're so proud, and I think my dad's a doctor, so I think he actually is really happy I didn't, because I'm very squeamish with
Yeah.
needles. My sister became a vascular surgeon, so one of the kids became a.
That's
Yeah.
so nice. My parents haven't forgiven me. I should have mentioned, I
Really?
guess I went to Johns Hopkins pre-med. And
You did?
Wow, you were
I was-
pre-med,
I
right?
was pre-med at Johns Hopkins. I thought I would be a doctor. And I still remember the day I told my parents that I was not continuing forward. I had done an internship at Harper's Bazaar, the fashion magazine, over the summer, and it was like a lark internship I did just for fun, because I figured that the year after I would be studying for MCATs. And I just fell in love with fashion magazines, like the energy, the fact that people, like there was a staff of, I mean, nowadays it wouldn't be a staff of like 100, but it was like a staff of 100 people bustling around in this office, kind of being paid to like write and like be creative about fashion and beauty. And when I told my parents, it's like, I think they're still disappointed, to be totally honest. So Roopal, you're very lucky to have such supportive parents. I still get told I could go to business school. And
Really?
so
But you've written like 3 books.
I've written 9 books.
9
And
books. Okay, see,
yeah, and like
9
9 books with 3 series, but 9 books, and like, which have hit the like New York Times list, etc. But like, it's still, I can talk to the other side of parental disappointment. Like, we can make this
Well,
into a therapy session for the like 50 people on this call.
Eva, I can relate a little to what you said, because my parents wanted me to go to MIT and, be an engineer or be a doctor.
Wow.
And when I decided not to go to MIT, they wouldn't talk to me for 2 years.
Wow.
But I went to that school that they hated, which is I went to Yale, which they thought was just so bad compared to going to MIT. So what can I say, right?
It's like
So,
LOL, very like, oh God, like you went to Yale. Poor
yeah.
you.
Let me ask you now, I have a couple of questions, but let's just start out with the big picture, which is, and we have, the 3 of you have been in the industry for a while, some longer, some less. How big a problem is it in terms of being Asian American in the fashion industry? But also, is it easier now compared to, when some of you first started, or is it always been a problem? And this is a question to any one of you, which is, how big a problem is it? By the way, there's some professions where it's a really big problem, others that it's kind of a moderate problem. In general, it's a problem, but how would you characterize how big a problem is there in terms of advancement, career advancement in the fashion industry for Asian Americans? Anywhere. It doesn't have to be
I can
alphabetical now.
start. Do you want me to like, I mean, I feel like I'm in the fashion industry tangentially.
Mhm.
So I feel like working at Instagram, overseeing fashion means that I work across a broad spectrum, working with everyone, like creative directors like Laura, and Fernando, to publications, to editors, to stylists, to models. And so I almost feel like I'm like a content advisor on behalf of the industry. But I think what that affords me is like this big picture perspective into the industry and kind of seeing
Right.
these macro trends. And what I would say, while the others formulate their thoughts, and I will be like super blunt, I feel like there is more diversity for Asians, but just in broadly, but I don't think at the right levels for
Oh, I see.
Asian Americans. So I
Yeah.
think there's a lot in the entry level point. And then I think as you get more senior, and this is true across every, industry, it's like it just gets less and less prevalent the closer you get to the top. And
Yeah,
so
and the data shows that, in pretty much many industries, Asian Americans do really well at the entry level, but somehow when they get to the mid level, it just becomes a big problem. So what you're saying in fashion, it's similar.
yes, I would say it's similar, and I would say that there's this what they call it, the bamboo ceiling, right? We've all read and heard that term, especially over the last few years. And I think that it's the same in fashion. What I feel can counteract that and help that in the industry, and I certainly feel like you have 3 members of this kind of movement on this Zoom, is that the support I feel like that the Asian community has for each other within fashion, is really critical. And the sense of it's not competition. We're not competition against each other. We're literally like here to kind of hold each other up and kind of help each other and provide resources. And I very much have felt that, and I see that in the Asian fashion community, and that's phenomenal. But I don't think it's enough. No.
Yeah. Okay, RuPaul, Laura, how big a problem is it?
I mean, on a personal, like just over the years, I think it's evolving and it's transitioning. Well, so much in the last 5 years to the last 10 years. 20 years ago, it was crickets in the fashion industry. I think when you were looking at C-suite or looking at top level positions, even just like top editors like Eva or a fashion director like myself, like that just, it wasn't heard of. And I think within the space today, I think there's more focus on how to be more diverse, with more investment in DEI and really companies. And I know just because at Saks, it's been a really big part of what we've been working on these last few years to sort of really, have more diversity within our teams. And yes, it is like in our buying force, in our creative force. But I think at top levels, I think there is more opportunity for Asians within these C-suite roles. And that's something within fashion in particular, I think considering some of our, you look at some of our design community as well, it's so much incredible talent. So, and I can flip that to Laura, just because in New York.
Okay, Laura, by the way, I met Laura, at a official function, whatever. And you can't tell on Zoom, but Laura is very tall. I just want to let you know, Laura is very tall. I don't know about RuPaul and Eva because I haven't met them, but I could tell you
Eva's tall.
very tall, right?
I'm the most, I'm a little.
No, I know the exact heels that Laura was wearing.
I
She's
was
not
wearing
actually that tall. I don't know, like, I don't want to burst your bubble, Peter, but I'm pretty sure you're like, are you like 5'5", 5'6"?
Who?
How tall are you, Laura?
I'm 5'6". I'm
Yeah,
not
I was about to
tall.
say you're like 5'5.5", but she wears very high heels.
Oh, it was
And also, she is
the
like,
heels. Oh, okay. All right. Now you've been outed by
yeah,
Eva.
I'm sorry.
Okay,
Eva's
so
tall, though.
Laura,
Eva is tall in her flats, I must
yeah,
say.
back to the question now. How big a problem is it? Do you perceive?
So when I go to like graduating, so Parsons or Pratt in New York, when every May, when there's a graduating class, I go to see their work, and it's like 90% of the top 20 students are Asian.
Mhm,
Then I come to work and you don't see that.
mhm,
So it is true, like this, and if I do see it, it is at the assistant level, and they usually don't make it to the top position. And I think it's because like culturally we're a little bit more shy. Like we got the craftsmanship, we have the work ethic, the talent, but we're just like shy and we're not like fighting to be seen in the studio because
yeah.
like I run my studio very openly and it's like everyone can bring an opinion. But I feel like the young Asian designers are like scared,
Mhm, mhm.
bring up their idea. And I mean, like equally for everyone will like openly talk about things and or like say no to their ideas. And I think that's just like not comfortable for a lot of Asian students. So I see a lot of them not growing past the assistant level.
Yeah. RuPaul and Eva, what do you think are I think all three of you believe it's a big problem, in terms of obstacles. Anything you might want to add about some of the reasons that you think it gets to be a problem once you get past the entry level?
I mean, in my experience, I've worked for some different corporate companies, and I think different companies have different points of view.
Mhm.
Some are a little bit more conservative, some are a little bit more just cooler and more aggressive in their approach to how they want to be seen. And I think in that experience. I think it's also mindful in looking at when you're looking to find an employer, it's like finding a family
Right.
who, you
right.
know, working for a company that shows interest in their investment to diversity, shows interest in your culture, shows interest in your, you know, in having a more diverse force. I think here, you know, I've seen part of the reason, you know, I feel I'm comfortable here is because I think there's community of not just diversity, but women as well within the C-suite. So I think there's something about, I think it's a little bit of research on our end as well, but also advocating and doing, you know, doing things more as a community. But I think it's also making sure, as Laura was saying, our voices are heard. We are seen. So that is part of doing things even outside of, like for myself, doing things outside of my comfort zone. And that's taken some time over the years to be in a little bit more of a competitive space with my peers.
For the three of you, you know, one of the reasons that had been cited in a lot of the other panels we've had in different industries, often they say one of the problems is the lack of sufficient mentors, right?
Mm.
And a little bit, it goes back to what you say, Laura, which was, you know, a lot of Asians are shy, so they don't reach out to try to develop mentors. But then there's a separate issue of, are there easily available mentors, right?
Mhm.
And for men who are Caucasian, whatever, obviously in companies, they're probably just, you know, it's independent of the person's personality. They're just more potential mentors who are there. Do you feel that, and for you, obviously, maybe it was different, you know, in terms of developing mentors and so forth, but do you think that's part of the problem or maybe not? And in your case, if mentors helped you, how did you go about getting help from a mentor?
For my case, I mean, Oscar, my boss, Oscar de la Renta himself told me, you have to watch Red Carpet, you have to read Page Six, you have to read gossip magazines, you have to understand the press. And I personally didn't listen to him. I didn't understand the importance till um 'cause in a way he mentored me to become a creative director, but I just didn't follow what he was saying till he didn't give me the job when he was passing. He basically said, you don't like press, you do have to be a public figure, you do have to be part of this to do this job. And he gave it to someone else, and that's when I was like, okay, I get it now.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I have a business partner who's not Asian. He's Spanish. He's from Dominican Republic, and he is born to do PR. And just watching him, I learned like, ah, I see what Oscar meant. So like, I did have a mentor, but I just didn't understand it. I love like working in the back. I love like just like working through weekends and coming in early, leaving late. I thought giving a lot of hours and working hard was like my way to success. And I didn't realize there's another part of this job, which is promoting myself, being in public, making friends, or talking about my work. So I learned that in the hard way, but I did have a mentor that I didn't listen to.
I think you undersell yourself, because I think the things that you're talking about of working hard, staying late, getting in early, doing the work, at the end of the day, I feel like that is the foundation of
Yeah,
success and longevity in fashion, because there are a lot of people in fashion who want to do the job, the other job, the self-promotion, but not work that much.
yeah,
The
that's
kind of
true.
the fun
Yeah.
parties and hanging out with celebrities. Like, and so I think for me, like, you know, I had my daughter in the office because like, you know, a few hours ago, because she had a doctor's appointment, and then I'm like trying to figure it all out. And she was literally like sitting in this meeting while I'm in a meeting, like drawing on the whiteboard next to me. And it's like,
Can we get her to answer a couple of these questions?
I know she's gone home since, but I can show you the art on the wall. You could probably see it there.
Oh, I see.
Like,
Okay. All
but
right.
what I would say is like this, like work ethic
Mm-hmm.
that has been instilled in me from my immigrant parents, seeing how hard they work to survive, seeing the hours that they put in, seeing that like just the deep drive to build a life for the next generation, for me and my brother, was really, really valuable. And so I think that all the things you're talking about are tools for success. And, of course, Oscar like loved you. He put you in charge of his brand, basically, and you are the steward of his brand for the next generation, which you've done like so beautifully.
Amazing.
I think what's tough with mentors, Asian mentors, is because there are so few of them. It's like you're looking at a few of them right now, Peter. Like Roopal and I serve on a program called the CFDA Vogue Fashion Fund, where like our role is literally to mentor the next generation of young designers. Once a year, it's a batch of 10. And it's like, I think the fact that there is diversity in that judging selection group is incredibly critical. I think most of my mentors have not been Asian, but the what I would say in the traditional sense of mentorship, but like my parents, like they are my like model for work ethic. And that in that respect, they are my mentors. Like they don't know anything about the fashion industry, the type of work I do, tech, like they don't know the difference between Instagram and TikTok, but like their work ethic has served as like an unofficial mentor to me.
It's very interesting the point you said though about about behavioral things and mentors. There really is a difference by different ethnic group to the extent that people really want to be mentors and want to help each other. And actually, we had one panel with two well-known academics, Jackson Liu from MIT, that respected school, and Michael Morris, who is a professor at Columbia Business School. And they did 7 or 8 studies on this issue of the career ceilings, but also is there a difference by ethnic group? And one of the things they found is exactly what you're saying, which is there's less of a ethnic tendency on the part of Chinese, Japanese Americans, Korean Americans to go be philanthropic and help each other. They're going to help their family members, but not across. Indian Americans, however, Roopal, are quite different. They're more like the Jewish community. They spend a lot of time helping each other. And as a result, they've done quite well, relatively speaking, compared to the East Asians. By the way, at the end of their panel, after they concluded that, in fact, Indian Americans do better, my parting comment was, does that mean we should all be adopted by an Indian American, family, right? If we're not Indian American. But I think that's part of the problem, which isn't a general ethnic, philosophy of helping each other out as a community. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. No, and that's interesting. I didn't know that because I think like that's the part in talking about the different support systems that exist within the Asian community. I think in the generationally also, I think I agree with Eva in the sense of like our parents who came with very little and have worked so hard. We learned our work ethic from them, but somehow had a crack, the door cracked a little bit open for us. And we saw this, but we also all had parents that were pushing us, to be like, we're here, like take advantage of these opportunities. And I think that was the part where I was shy growing up. I wasn't anything like I am today. I was nerdy. Kids made fun of me. I loved fashion. The stories I can tell you what I became later in my career. And even when I started out, I was intimidated by going to a cocktail party of fashion hours. I'd like walk in, I'd look around and I'd leave because I was so scared. Right.
Boy, it's hard to imagine you as a shy person, but
no, I believe I'm more introverted, but I think the one thing what I respect what Eva said, because I think the one thing I knew very early on, and Laura is the same, although you would never know it because it's so flawless, right? I wanted first people before anything to know me for my work.
Mhm.
I wanted people to not look at me and think, oh, there's a brown girl, she's Indian, she's this. I was like, oh my God, there's like Roopal, like, she's amazing at what she does. So to work harder, to be the best at what you do. And I think in this space of current fashion, there is like, and I see it because we have everything from assistant buyers, assistants, creatives. I see the kids who are out of school, 21, 22, and are hustling. I see that. And then I also see the ones that are, a little shy, need a little help. So it is our responsibility as individuals who have been fortunate to sort of, pick up, help, support every, all of the kids and all of the, individuals who are aspiring to do what we did. But first and foremost, like, you're your own product. Like, how are you going to sell yourself? Like, you got to be the best at what you do.
I'm going to switch to another question, which is actually a very difficult question. And that
Okay.
is, one of the challenges every time when we have one of these panels on a particular industry, the real problem is it's rare that the industry doesn't have lots of different segments. Do you know what I mean? So if you talk about fashion, there's so many different segments. It's everything from people who are designers or buyers or marketing, and they're large firms, they're partnerships, they're retail companies, et cetera. I mean, the three of you, for example, are not exactly, you're in three different parts of the fashion industry. So the question is really this, to what extent, for the audience, some of whom are just interested in what you have to say, some who are trying to pursue a career in fashion, how do you see, the relevant segments around this question? And do you see any differences in this career ceilings thing by segment? In other words, is it different in retail versus design versus, the reporting part? And maybe it isn't, but I'm asking really the three of you whether you do feel there are differences by the different segments in the industry.
I'm gonna let Eva and Roopal answer first because I don't really understand the question.
I think that there is.
Maybe they always want you to answer the hard question, Eva.
I think there's probably variance because again, I work at a tech company, so it's like working at Instagram. It's the DEI and especially prioritizing diverse leadership is something that is extremely critical to this company. What I would say is that there's definitely variance, but it's still not enough.
Yeah.
What I would say is that the fashion industry, and this is kind of not really answering your question, but like it's a notoriously fickle industry in every sense of the way. It's every sense of the word. It's also an industry that is evolving. I know every industry is evolving with like, technology, and also right now with the advent of AI and also like consumer habits. In fashion, especially, it's going through a seismic change, which like Laura and Roopal know firsthand, in terms of the way consumers shop. And so it's changing in every respect. It's not just change. The way Roopal's doing her job now is different because of the way like people shop. And that also probably has an impact on the type of people that are hired.
Oh,
Is what
interesting.
my guess would be. I don't know if that answers your question at all, but hopefully about Roopal and Laura some time.
But will those,
Thank
the
you.
changes you're talking about, do you think they'll make it harder overall? Do you think it'll make it harder or easier for Asian Americans? When you think about the changes you're talking about,
I
how
think
people
that
shop,
this is just, I feel like there is a general broadening, flattening of the industry. Fashion's influence and the fashion industry used to be like very conical, and now it's basically super flat. And there's the fashion industry, the way people talk about it, or the way that our generation would talk about it, is different from the way that the next gen talks about it.
Okay.
So for a next gen student who's studying at Parsons or FIT, when they talk about entering the fashion industry, it's different from how Roopal, Laura, and I thought about it. There are other jobs that now exist that did not exist for us. So someone can be a merchandiser or a buyer in fashion, but doing it for Dress X, which is like a digital goods company. Someone can be a designer, but designing avatars for Instagram. Like literally there's someone whose job it is, not on my team, working with Valentino to create looks for Instagram's avatars. This is like an actual example. There's someone on my team whose job it is to be the go-between between like a fashion house like Balenciaga or Chanel and Dior, and connect them to like the Reality Labs team to explore ways we can work together on Oculus. I don't know, I'm making this up. So these are all jobs that didn't exist when we were trying to break in. And so I think in that sense, it probably is a good thing because different types, different people. You could go to a Yale or an MIT. Just kidding. You can come from anywhere. You could come from like a very different background.
So it's not going to be one of those things, well, we've always done it this way, and this is what the job has always looked like this. So that creates opportunity, right? Because now opportunity, it could go either way, right? But whatever it is, it unfreezes sort of, a historical way of this is the way we do it. Roopal, you're about to say something?
Yes, and I know in addition to what Ava's saying, I think too, like technology.com, the way we shop has also changed. So there's more, we have a whole office and a whole team based in India who helps with all of our order input, and they're part of the Saks family. It's not like, oh, that's India. I have like, it's Diwali, Saks Diwali on my calendar as part of our holiday programming. And that makes me very proud. So I think the part also, like, as Eva was saying, like content, our social team is huge. Our digital team is huge. Our need for content is huge. So all of a sudden you have all of these new opportunities, tech. We didn't need a tech team. We didn't have a tech team when I joined the company 8 years ago.
Yeah.
We have a whole tech team now with all of these engineers and gurus and wizards. I don't know, but they make magic on our website so our customers have a more seamless experience. So I do think there are things that, quote unquote, like are part of other businesses. And as I say, like we're a business, like at the end of the day, fashion is a creativity, but we work in billions of dollars, selling billions of dollars. And I think that's part of, we have jobs that people didn't go to school for fashion for, and they come here. And then I'm going to lead into something that I want to pass Laura, but I think also one of the things that I've been very excited about is the amount of Asian designers that are coming to New York Fashion Week, that are returning, that are showing. I think that's something that the designers had started maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago. Laura, for example, really taking, she's a female designer. There weren't a lot of female designers taking lead of being, at Oscar de la Renta, it was designed by a man for so long. So that was like fabulous. But then you have Peter Do, you have Prabal Gurung, you have Philip Lim, you have Jason Wu, there are all of these Asian creatives that really are meant to be the next generation of American fashion and the visionaries. So then it's Eva, my responsibility to make sure as well that we are supporting these voices, but that's also to me another great space for Asian talent to also build community and support system.
Yeah.
Within design.
I think both you and Eva have made a really good point, which is don't make a career decision based on what the industry looks like today. Because unless you won't plan on having a 1-year career in the industry, you got to think out to the extent that you can, and it's hard, what it's going to look like in 10 years or 20 years. Just like, for example, one of you, father's a doctor. Well, being a doctor today versus 20 years ago versus 20 years from now, dramatically different. So you gotta plan for that change because it's going to happen. And technology is certainly one of the factors, right? It's not the only factor, but it's an important factor. So it sounds like people should make sure they pay attention to that. Laura, you have any comments?
Like Roopal mentioned, there's a lot of Asian designers in New York, and it is a city where it's very welcoming to start your own brand. And I do feel like fashion industry in New York does support young Asian designers, like starting our own brand. It's when I started my own brand, I was shocked by how many people showed up to support and how many people were willing to help. So there is definitely big positivity in New York City for Asian designers.
Yeah.
And I think also like as a designer, for example, one of my intern, talented, and he started a TikTok called girlfriend of fashion designer boyfriend or something like that, and he made a career out of himself. Like he's not necessarily a designer like me, but he's like making clothes for his girlfriend on TikTok, and he's huge. So I think there's different way you can use your creativity now.
Yeah. Well, one thing's for sure is certain industries, not all, the opportunity to do your own thing and to start up is either more or less. There's some there's some industries that you just can't do a startup. It's just the capital and everything else required is huge or whatever. But others, where that's true, and you got to ask yourself whether you're an entrepreneur or not, because if you're not, it's a bad idea no matter what industry you're in. But that's something to think about. So I think, Laura, what you're saying is at least there is an avenue, not in every part of fashion, but there are some parts of fashion where doing your own thing and starting is a potential route to success, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And Laura, I assume you don't discriminate against yourself in your own shop, right? Based on your ethnicity, right? So, question, do you think it's different for men versus women in fashion in terms of Asian American career ceilings? Yes, no, maybe, in what way?
Peter's asking the really spicy questions.
I'm gonna let you
Isn't
take
that
that
my
one,
isn't that
Eva.
my job though?
Is it like, did Roopal just say like, I'm gonna let you take that, Eva?
Yes.
Yeah, I think there is a difference. I think that if you look at the cohort of male Asian designers, there's many more.
Yeah.
And when you think about Laura, I'm trying to think like, who else is there for
I'm
Vera
mentoring Grace Ling.
Wang?
Yeah,
Who was the person you just said?
Grace Ling. She's like a new female
The
designer.
female designer, we're talking about like, let's talk about established. It's like you,
It's
Vera, Anna, Sui.
Anna Sui.
It's three, maybe five max. And so, and then when I can name probably like 12 male Asian designers, and it's like, I, I think that when I think about, I love wearing like a woman designed piece of clothing because the consideration and the feeling of it feels different to me in a way. I'm thinking about the newest winner of one of the newest finalists for CFDA, Rachel Scott from Diotima. Like, I feel like she's a woman's designer. I was trying to explain this to someone yesterday. Like she's designing for the female gaze, and also like the fit, you can tell that a woman designed it. It like has flexibility for like the body. But I do think right now, especially, it's like, I don't want to make it like, for me personally, like I'm looking at less along gender lines and more about support for the broader kind of Asian community, I think is really important.
Yes.
Because I think that's the level we're at in terms of like fundamentals. And
But it is factually, there are more men who are designers versus and so forth. Can you maybe speculate on why? Maybe help the audience understand why. Is there a reason, and is there a reason that's going to go away? Maybe it's just a passage of time. Why is it that there's so many more, for example, the one you gave, more men who are successful designers, Asian American than women?
why, Peter, are there more male CEOs? Probably the same reason.
Yeah.
The burden of expectation for women is very different.
Yes.
The timeline and the biological timeline for women is very different. I mean, I can go on and on. Childcare, like responsibilities, it's just harder. And also, Laura talked earlier about being shy and having a harder time asking for things. I feel like that is
A big part of it.
it's a part of it, and the kind of stereotyping around Asian females in particular is very, very challenging for Asian women, where there's a sense, expectation of passivity or being in supporting roles versus the main star. But I also feel like that's also culturally, I mean, again, not to talk along gender roles, I feel like oftentimes in Asian culture, there's a pride aspect to it, not for female or male, but just for Asians in general, where there's very much we can go it alone. We don't want to ask for help. We don't want to owe people things kind of perspective, which can work against people, especially in the fashion industry, which so much of the fashion industry is asking for help. So
Yeah.
the fashion industry is about being willing to say, I need you to introduce me to this person. I was with a designer in London recently who I like love. I simply adore this guy. And he definitely is like, every single person I introduced him to was like, oh my God, I love you. Like, love your designs. I'd love to wear. And it's like, I told him, I was like, you have to remind me to connect you to these people over text because I'm not going to remember. I have like raging ADHD. Like I never remember anything. And then I texted him, I was like, you didn't remind me. And he was like, I just like don't like to ask people or bother people for help. And I'm like, again, this is not a male female thing. This is like an Asian thing. And that's something for the people watching, I think is something that is so hard. And it was like hard for me to learn as well because it's been coded in me. And I hear it from my parents even who are like, no, don't ask for help. Don't call this person. And I'm like, this is not how the world works these days. Like you have to be, the world is interconnected. It's not about being an island. It's about the bridges. We have to like, it's just different.
All I can say is from personal experience, I've got two very, very successful sisters. I got a very successful wife and had a very successful mother. And I've had any gender bias beaten out of me over time.
Wow.
So I have not had that experience of the shy, a woman, because that has not been true in my life. Roopal and Laura, can you comment on the same thing about men versus, women and why? Although, by the way, Eva, that was a very good,
No,
very good.
Ava, I don't,
Yeah,
Ava,
you get an A
Ava
plus. You
said
get an
it
A plus.
so, Ava said it so, but I think also in corporate America,
Yeah,
I think there is a formula and I think there is a programming that exists and it existed for like, since we came into school, all of it, right? And our generation is starting to transform it, where in most companies, it is a male CEO, you
yeah,
know, and that there's nothing wrong in it, but like we have a CEO and we have a lot of women, female SVPs,
yes,
SVP of
yes,
marketing, SVP of merchandising, SVP of like we have a lot of females. So I think that's the part too where we are in a place for women to excel and lead, Asian women to excel and lead. Some of my best friends are, right in that CEO suite, and they themselves say it's like it's almost like you need the same level of credentials, the same. So going back into into that natural experience to be quiet, to be, to not say anything, to not speak up. I think that's a part too of when I said get uncomfortable, like me going into the party and not knowing him and being like, oh, I'm scared, I'm leaving right now. Whereas now, like we go into prayer, I'm like, hi, I'm Roopal. And like, it is what it is.
The
So
first time I went to the Met Gala, I was in the bathroom most of the night. And then I didn't realize that the bathroom is actually the funnest part of the Met Gala. Like that's my socially coping mechanism is like when I go to a party, I immediately go to the bathroom and I hide there for a few minutes.
I'm
most of us are
we
never
all were,
invited
but I guess what I'm trying to, I'm forever an optimist in this because when we all started in this, like Ava had no idea she was gonna be the head of Instagram, like, or that EIC of Lucky, or like she had no idea. I had no idea that what I wanted was going to morph into this. Laura had no idea she was going to become the creative director and transform ODLR, like Oscar de la Renta. It is like this manifestation and this passion. Like you love so much as women and as Asians, we're like, we deserve a seat at the table too. And we're here and let's go with this. So I'm an optimist in that I think it's possible because the three of us are sitting right here with you today, Peter.
Yeah.
And all of you in the audience.
Well, certainly one thing is true, which Roopal you're saying, which is separate from this thing about career ceilings and whatever, put all that aside and Asian Americans. The reality is what I'm hearing from everybody is it's really helpful if you love what you do, right? But the other I'm hearing is the ability to have as high an EQ as your IQ is very helpful because essentially what a lot of you are saying is you got to be aware of things around you and people and what they're thinking and really thinking and be aware of that. And at times, maybe someone hits you over the head, like happened with Laura, with Oscar de la Renta, who said, you didn't follow my advice, right? And you learned, but then you pivoted, right? So I think those are two things, and both of those are not Asian American things per se, right? Those are just human, human dimensions. We're moving to the last 10 minutes. Those of you who may have questions, please either raise your hand or type in the Q&A chat box. But I'm going to keep on going until we get some questions here. Uh, if for each one of you, if you were starting today a career in fashion, what advice would you give to our audience about what are the 2 or 3 things that you really felt important, not to just be successful in general, but just not to end up hitting an obstacle because you're Asian American, right? So what advice would you give? They're all taking out their pencils and pens or whatever it is. So what's the key takeaway of what advice you would give to the audience about what they really have to focus on to succeed, while being Asian American?
I think even though I said in the beginning like I was only like working and not focusing on other things, but I do think building your skill set in the beginning of your career is really important, but just keep your eyes open to what's going around you and like making sure you're not like hiding in the shell. But you do have to promote yourself, but that shouldn't be the priority. Like you have to build your skill set first.
Now you have to be good you have to be good. First of all, you can't be no George Santos is right in the
No, you
fashion.
can't be born good either. You do have to like work on what you're born well into.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
I think in addition to that one thing, and it's been a learning lesson for me as I've progressed in my career, and I encourage my team to do it. It's like you have to be good at what you do, and you have to work hard at staying ahead of it, but also be yourself, right? I think like like for me, like letting down some of those guards and being vulnerable and being myself within my workplace, is something that I what I didn't it didn't come natural. I was very like, okay, we have to do this. We've come in corporate world. I have to achieve this, even though it's fashion, you still have to achieve. And I realized like in this time, like I have so much more fun and people get to know me and it's totally different. And that's probably my advice is like, love what you do, be passionate about what you do, be true to yourself in everything that you do.
No, that's right. Eva?
I think Laura kind of hit the nail on the head about, I think both Laura and Roopal kind of said the fundamentals, and I totally agree with them. I do think a lot of the time, people expect shortcuts in their career. People expect, fast tracks, and it doesn't really exist, especially in fashion. It's so important to just like, you need that like work ethic. You have to let that passion drive you. You have to be really, really good. I would say do your homework. A lot of the time I hear from people who are like, I am the first up, and I'm like, do your homework, because it's like actually like know who kind of walked in those steps ahead of you. That's deeply important. The other thing I would say is that a lot of people like that island mentality of like, I'm going to go it alone. It's like you actually don't want, a lot of people fixate on finding that one mentor who's going to be the silver bullet for them, who's going to like
Right.
open all the doors, who's going to be like basically their like card pass into like whatever room they're trying to get into. And it's great if you're lucky enough to find that mentor who is that person. It's actually quite rare, I think, to find a mentor like that. It's exceptionally rare. Um, and like one of the things that drives me crazy is when people out of the blue will email me and be like, will you be my mentor? And I'm like, no, like we've never met. I don't know your work ethic. It's like,
Yeah,
I
right.
really tend,
Right.
the people I mentor are the people who work for me. And like, I invest a lot in that. So if you haven't found that mentor type, like I would actually think about your cohort too, like your peers. Um, at the end of the day, you want a chorus of people of support. You want a chorus of people who are cheering you on. I think like the three of us, like Roopal, Laura, and like Laura in like the various chat groups we're in where people are like kind of like supporting each other, you see the kind of support people have for each other. So finding that chorus and like your community is really important. And also lastly, I would say is like speak what you like, it's the expression, like speak what you dare to dream, I guess. Like if you have a dream, if it is like your wildest dream, if your parents want you to be a biomedical engineer, but you dream of being like, a designer, it's like you can't just hold it in your heart. You actually have to go and do it, but you have to take the practical steps to do it. and don't expect overnight success. Very grim advice I'm giving, but
Oh,
Yeah.
boy, yeah, you're a downer. But by the way, I'm going to make one comment, and that is, if one of the things that we've heard in a lot of the panels is know yourself, and make sure you really know yourself, because and I'll give an example. I mentor a lot of people. I do it because I feel it's a good thing to do. Or mentor, I just give advice, right? And I remember one young, mid-30s Asian American male, he came and he said, I've been at Bank of America, I've been at Citibank, and I've been at the 3 investment banks, and I'm thinking of leaving the profession because I'm not happy. I asked him 2 questions. I said, well, do you like the work? Oh, he said, oh, yeah, I love the work. I really love the work. I said, so what is it you're unhappy about? We talked a little bit. It turned out what he really didn't like were all the politics at a large company. So I said, look, maybe this sounds a little obvious, but I don't think your problem is being in investment banking. It's you working at a large investment bank where there's a lot of politics. So why don't you join a small boutique or whatever and so forth?
Mhm.
Like I said, it just never occurred to me. It never occurred to me. And I said, well, go ask some of your friends and ask them to be brutally honest with you about what you really like, because it may turn out you're pursuing the wrong thing, right? Because you don't understand really what your problem or your what's good. Now we have 4 questions, but my rule is I'm only going to pick questions that relate to the issue. So it has to relate to the Asian American career things. So Anna Koo says, you have touched on this, but do Asians need to adapt or fit into an established corporate model, or are there other models that are a better fit, perhaps not the right phrase, or shouldn't another model be created? Many thanks. This is direct to anyone.
Hmm.
do you want me to start, guys? Anytime there's a silence, I like rush to fill it because I am like very much an anxious person. I think that's a great question. I think the corporate model means something very different, because like the way Oscar and Monse are set up and the way they are corporate, even within like, Laura's 2 roles of Monse and Oscar, those two corporate workplaces are completely different, right? Versus like the way Saks is set up like every corporate environment is different. And so I think it's less about like finding the right fit for an Asian American like plurality, like the whole kind of like being of Asians, versus finding the one that's right for you personally, which I think it takes time. Like I think it takes kind of like a Goldilocks approach to finding like something might be too corporate, something might be too unstructured before you find the right fit for you personally.
Yeah. Here's another one from Mr. or Mrs. or Ms. Anonymous Attendee, which we really thank. In DEI, which is diversity, equity, and inclusion, do Asians count as oppressed people of color or privileged white adjacent? Interesting question.
That is
Hmm.
interesting.
That's a hard one to answer too. RuPaul?
Thoughts?
Right.
I always have thoughts. Do you want me to?
Yes.
Yes, because I
So
don't
if
feel,
there
I don't
are-
feel as
Okay,
good.
so there
Yeah.
is a perception of Asians as a model minority, like that might be perpetuated by like the success stories you see on this call, right? The 4 of us have been fortunate enough to like, achieve the things we've achieved, and also be in the rooms that we're in. The reality, and this is for New York City specifically, is that most Asians live below the poverty line. Like in Asia, in Chinatown, for instance, most people struggle and are living like in conditions that are really not livable. And so the model minority myth is one that's been kind of, I think personally, like kind of planted and seeded throughout time, certainly not recently, for a while, to kind of sow division between other minorities, in my personal opinion. And if you look at the actual statistics, most Asians, recent immigrants, and Asian Americans are below the poverty line. So in DEI, like I don't know about privileged white adjacent, but I do know that there's a lot of work to be done, especially for like recent immigrants. And so organizations like Apex for Youth are doing incredibly important work in supporting that cohort.
Yeah. And I do want to mention one thing. By the way, the Committee 100 Annual Conference and Gala is on April 19th. And two of the sessions are going to be on this career ceilings, but also we're going to have an interesting thing. We're going to have a debate where we're going to have debaters on both sides of the following question, which is, will corporate DEI efforts have the same fate as affirmative action because of the Supreme Court and so forth, which is a very interesting question, right? Because now the same people who went all the way up to the Supreme Court are suing companies for saying DEI groups are discriminating. So it's going to be very interesting. It's going to be a very interesting development for all of us. Roopal, Laura, anything on that one question that was asked by Ms. Anonymous?
No, I think Eva covered it very well. Like I also don't know much about it. So no, I was actually learning while Eva was saying all.
Now we pride ourselves, there were 3 other questions, but they were not all related to career ceilings. I'll share them with the panelists. So if they want to be able to send that, answer to you. Eva answered one of them on cosmetic surgery. Thank you, Eva. That was nice of you. She's an A-type, let's face it. That's not passive. But we like to start on time and we like to end on time, and we're now at 6 o'clock. So I really want to say, first of all, thank you to the 3 panelists. It was really wonderful, and a really refreshing discussion about the issue. And I hope the audience really appreciated it. And the other is, encourage the audience. We're going to have one on January 16th on why Asian Americans are paid less. And then we're going to have one, I think, February 8th on journalism and the news. And then those of you who want to come to our annual conference, there'll be a number of topics like this. But I want to thank the panelists. I also want to tell the panelists something rather interesting, which is the number of people who are in the audience is exactly the same as at the beginning as now, which is very unusual because usually you lose a bunch of at it. So you guys must have said some interesting stuff because you kept people in their seats. So thank you all. And thank you, the 3 panelists, and thank you, audience, for joining us. And we'll look forward to seeing you at our next event.
Thank you
so much.
And thank you, Peter, for
Laura.
moderating. Thanks, guys. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you,
Bye,
Eva.
everyone. Thanks for joining. Bye.
Thank you, audience.